All right, so this video is going to be about Chapter 9 of Building College Reading Skills. And if you want to follow along in your book, you can open up to page 355. So the title of this chapter is Implied Main Ideas. And one of the things that we've talked about before is that we've talked about the location of main ideas and how to find main ideas. And what we said is that at the beginning of a paragraph is the most common place for the main idea, but it can also come in the middle and the end. We said that we should look for repeated words to find the topic. We said also that we should use list words to help us find the main idea, and we can also use addition words to find the major supporting details that will help us. However, sometimes in paragraphs there is no one sentence that contains the main idea. In this case, we say that the main idea is implied rather than stated. So some of what this chapter is going to go about is going to talk about how we can go through finding the implied main idea when there isn't one sentence that has the main idea for us. Okay. So let's go through this. So what are implied main ideas? Well, main ideas aren't always stated. Sometimes you have to infer them from the evidence. And what we mean by this is that by infer, it means that we have to make a guess or we have to make a conclusion. So the guess or the conclusion we make is not just random. We're using the information that we do have to make a guess. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. So here, if we're taking a look at this advertisement, it says, "Are you waiting in line?" Now, there's nothing there that says what the main idea is, but if we look at all the information there, we can get an idea. One thing we see is we see a line of cigarettes, and we see the first cigarette in the line in a noose, and we know that a noose is used to kill people. So the main idea of this poster is that smoking kills, right? That all of these people are standing in line. All of these cigarettes, supposed to represent people, are standing in line to be killed. Okay, all the other ones are waiting in line. So this one, even though the main idea isn't stated, it's very clear what we mean. Let's take an example. So here is a cartoon, and this is on page 356. So it says, "This place is too cold, there's too much snow, and everybody looks the same." So if we look at this, we see some penguins, we see them standing in a snow, and we see that they're saying it's too cold, too much snow, and everyone looks the same. So we have to ask ourselves, are these things positive things or are these things negative things? And we should remember that whenever we see two means something is wrong. T-O-O means something's wrong. So let's look at possible implied main ideas. The first one, the speaker will not be happy anywhere. Well, there's not enough information for us to make that guess because all we know is that the speaker is not happy where he or she is right now. The speaker wants to live somewhere else. That makes sense. The speaker is complaining about the place that he is now, so it makes sense that he or she wants to go somewhere else. The speaker doesn't get along with the other penguins. There's no information in this picture to prove that they don't get along. Now, so the answer, of course, is 2. The thing we have to be careful about with implied main ideas is that when we're making an implied main idea or when we're choosing, it doesn't mean that number 1 and number 3 are not true. It's just we don't have enough information from the picture and from the words to say that they are true. Okay, so moving on to finding implied main ideas in reading. So in addition to visual materials, the main idea is often not directly stated, but it's clearly implied, meaning that it's suggested very clearly. So if we take a look on page 357, you have the same paragraph there. Let me go ahead and read this through, and then we'll talk about the things that we can choose. "I was in an alley, dressed in light summer clothing. Coming out of the darkness at the end of the alley were hundreds of large gray rats. Their razor-sharp teeth glistened with saliva, and their eyes glowed red with a cold fury. I turned to run away, but attacking in the other direction were a dozen angry dogs, pit bulls, and these particular pit bulls were foaming at the mouth. They all had rabies. Just my luck, I muttered, and did my best to wake up as quickly as possible. So let's look at these ones, and we want to say which one of these suggestions is the best main idea for this. So let's look first at A. The writer is losing his mind. Now, if you're not sure what that means, losing your mind means going crazy. Now, there are some crazy things in the story, but if we look at the last sentence, it says, I muttered and I did my best to wake up as quickly as possible. So it shows us that it's not that the person is losing their mind, it's just that they're having a bad dream. So let's look at the next one. Gray rats and pit bulls are scary animals. Well, that's definitely true, right? In this case, it says about the rats. It says their razor-sharp teeth glistened with saliva, and it says the pit bulls were foaming at the mouth. But we need to ask ourselves: is this the main idea of the whole thing? Is the writer just trying to tell us that that these animals are scary? And the answer is no, right? The statement that rats and pit bulls are scary doesn't account for the last sentence in which the writer reveals all the other statements described a nightmare. Okay? So let's look at the next one. Everyone has nightmares. So this is a difficult one. Everyone has nightmares means that it's talking about other people besides the author. But if we look at this one, the author doesn't talk about anyone else but herself. Okay? So this one doesn't make sense either, because it's just about one person's dream rather than about everybody's dream. So that leaves us with this last choice. The writer had a really bad dream, and this is the best answer. The description of the dream with the rats and the dogs show that it was bad, and the fact that it was a dream is made clear in the last sentence where it says that that she was trying to wake up as quickly as possible. Alright, so we want to go through 4 steps. We're going to go through a 4-step process as we try to find the implied main idea. Okay, the first one of them is the easiest, and this one is recognizing implied general ideas. So in this one here we have a list of specific items. We have a baseball cap, a football helmet, and an Easter bonnet. Now, an Easter bonnet, if you don't know, is a special hat that some people wear, normally women, that wear on Easter Sunday, which is a Christian holiday. So the general idea that we choose has to cover all of these. So a baseball cap is a hat that baseball players wear. A football helmet is the hat that football players wear, American football players, and an Easter bonnet is what we just said. So let's go through and look at these. So the first one is sports hats. Well, a baseball cap and a football helmet are both sports hats, but an Easter bonnet isn't, so we can't choose that one. The next one is clothing. And in a sense, yeah, they're all kinds of clothing, but that is a very, very general statement because it doesn't talk about shirts or shoes or any other kind of clothing. It only talks about, and here's our answer, it only talks about hats. So A is wrong because it's too narrow, right? The Easter bonnet doesn't fit into this category. 2, B is wrong because it's too broad, right? There's more than, these are only clothing that is worn on the head, so that one's not right. So hat is the correct one. A couple of things to remember when you're looking for the general idea. The first thing is that the general idea must cover all of the specific ideas. So hats covers all of those things: baseball cap, football helmet, and Easter bonnet. The general idea must not be so narrow that it excludes any specific items. So, for example, sports hats was too narrow because it didn't cover Easter bonnet. And the general idea that covers many kinds of specific items in addition to the ones in the list is too broad. So, for example, clothing was too broad because it does cover hats, but it also covers other things like shoes and pajamas. So we wanna have the one that's just right. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Let's look at these sentences, and we're going to do the same thing. So here, these are quotations, so these are things that people said. I couldn't take the final because my grandmother died. I couldn't come to work because I had a migraine headache. I couldn't study because I forgot to bring my book home. So let's go through each one of these choices. The first one is common remarks, and a remark means something that someone says. Now all of these things are common remarks, but there's lots of other common remarks as well. So that one is too broad. I couldn't take the final because my grandmother died, and I couldn't study because I forgot to bring my book home. Both of those are student excuses, but the middle one is not. It's talking about work. Okay. So moving on to step number 2. This is on page 361. So in this one, we want to put the implied general ideas into our own words. So here's 4 specific ideas, and then we want to decide on a general idea that's neither too broad nor too narrow. So we have orange juice, water, milk, and blood. And we want to ask ourselves, what's the general idea? Now when we first look at this, if we look at orange juice, water, and milk, we can say, oh, these are all beverages, or these are all things that drink. But the thing is that when we look at blood for most people is not a beverage. So that one would be too narrow. So we want to have a broader idea that can include all of these, and here we can say liquids, right? All of these things, orange juice, water, milk, and blood, are considered to be liquids, so that would be a good guess. Moving on to recognizing implied main ideas, this is on page 363. When figuring out an unstated main idea in a paragraph, your choice must not be too broad or too narrow. So again, we're getting into this. We want to get the choice that's just right? Just like Goldilocks and the 3 bears. You must select a general statement that includes all or most of the specific ideas in a paragraph. So let's take a look at this list. Men accuse women of not trusting them. Men complain that women have little interest in sports. Men say that women change the subject when they're losing an argument. So here's our choices for the unstated main idea. Men think women don't trust them. Well, this one is too specific. It only covers the first one, right? The first one says women don't trust them, but the second one is about their interest in sports, and the third one is about changing the subject, so that doesn't work. Men accuse women of talking too much. Well, in none of these does it talk about women talking too much, so that one can't be it. So the next one says men have various complaints about women. That one works, right? The first complaint is that women don't trust them. The second one is that they're not interested in sports. And the third one is that they change the subject. Okay, so that one works. But let's look at the last one to make sure. Men have strong positive and negative views about women. Well, in this case, part of this is correct. Men have strong negative views about women. All of these are negative views about women, but there's nothing positive that's said there. So the best answer is going to be C. So A is too narrow. B is too narrow and it's not supported. Okay. And D is too broad because it refers to positive and negative. So our best answer here is C. Okay. So moving on. So the final step is to work at finding implied main ideas in paragraphs. So obviously this is going to be more difficult. So let's take a look at this paragraph. This paragraph is on page 365. Okay. So let me go ahead and read it, and then we'll look at the unstated main idea choices. If people stop to think about the plots in children's stories, they may be surprised. Hansel and Gretel, for example, were abandoned by their father and stepmother and left to wander in a dark forest. In another well-known story, Cinderella was treated like a slave by her stepmother and stepsisters. Then there is the case of Little Red Riding Hood, who was eaten by a wild animal. Finally, consider the example of the three blind mice. As if being blind weren't bad enough, they also had to deal with the horror of having their tails cut off by the farmer's wife. So one of the things when we're looking in a paragraph, we said with the implied main idea, there's not going to be a sentence that states it. However, we can still pay attention to the major support. So some of the words that we could have circled that would help us are another, and then, and finally, right? So these ones are addition words. Then, I know, is not an addition words, but another and finally are. So in this we have examples of different children's stories. So let's look at A. Children's stories are about step families. Well, in two of the stories, yeah. In Hansel and Gretel, there's a stepmother, and with Cinderella, there's also a stepmother. But with Little Red Riding Hood and the three blind mice, there's no stepmother, so that can't be the answer. B says Cinderella was treated like a slave. Well, that's true, but that's only talking about one story. C, animals and children are important characters in children's stories. Well, let's take a look at this. It does talk about children, right? In the first one, Hansel and Gretel. Cinderella is also a child. Little Red Riding Hood is also a child, and the three blind mice are also are not children, are animals. So in some sense, this would be okay. However, it leaves out the father and the stepmother, and also the other stepmother in Cinderella's story. So we would say that this again is too narrow because it doesn't include everything. So the last answer, which must be right, says children's stories often deal with violence, evil and violence. So in the first one, the evil is abandoning children in a dark forest. In the second one, Cinderella is treated like a slave. In the third one, we have the violence of Little Red Riding Hood being eaten by a wild animal. And in the fourth one, we have the violence of the three blind mice having their tails get cut off. So we can keep in mind that these should be a surprising fact. This one, as we said before, includes part of it, but not all of it, and it's also not that surprising. The second one, whoops, the second one is too specific, right? It's only about the Cinderella story. The third one, in the story of Cinderella, has nothing to do with animals and children. It depends. I mean, you could treat Cinderella as a child, but it's also not a particularly surprising fact. And so then our last one is going to be the best one, okay? Because each one of these ones are dealing with violence, and it's surprising that a children's story would be about violence. Okay. Okay, so to summarize, in this chapter we learned that at times authors imply or suggest a main idea without stating it directly in one sentence. You can figure out an implied main idea by looking closely at the supporting details. And to find the main idea, look for a general idea that covers the details in the question rather than one that is too broad or too narrow. Okay, so in class we'll take some time and do the practices in the book. Bring any questions you have to class. Take care. Bye.